What's going on, guys? My name's Christopher and welcome to It's Complicated. It's basically just a show where I talk about and show off some awesome wristwatches, even some of the more minor wristwatches that aren't as highly collectible, aren't as expensive, etc. Today, we're going to be talking about how slick this Rolex Submariner date is. It's a 16610, so them lugs are going to be real thin on this NATO strap. It's just an incredible look. A lot of people call this the Bond NATO. I'm going to get into that as well. So here we go. Okay, and I mean, how great does that look? I mean, just look at it. Now, this is a Rolex Submariner date from 2 generations ago of me uploading this video, of course. This is the 16610T. It's a pretty rare one from Rolex because it does have the engravings on that rehaut. And I believe they only made it like this for 3 years. The value of this watch has increased tremendously since I picked it up. This is a very nice piece, gentlemen. Now, if you've seen my last video, I did mention the value of the older watches not really going anywhere. But let's get on to this NATO strap. I do just love this thing. Just look at it. I've been wearing it on this watch for quite a while now. I haven't put it on the bracelet at all. It is just such a good looking piece. I've seen other Submariners on the NATOs, you know, the more recent models, and I think the thickness of the lugs just really is making the watch stick out too much. Like here, check a picture out. Here's the 16610, and it doesn't look bad, but the watch just pops a little too much for me. Does that make sense? It just busts out and screams, "I'm too big to be here." Really just not my favorite. I wouldn't put my Batman on a NATO. Although that being said, I've really never tried to put my Batman on a NATO strap. Now here's the latest model Submariner no date, and they did thin the lugs quite a bit, but they're still just not as thin as the 16610s. And this watch, it doesn't scream as much as the other one, but it does scream just quite a bit. You know, it's not as smooth as this watch looks. It just doesn't look as smooth. Of the Rolex models I own, it's really tough to decide which is my favorite, but this Submariner is just so nice. It's so nice, it's rare. I wear it often. Another benefit of wearing this watch on a NATO strap is you're not stretching that bracelet. Have you guys heard of that bracelet stretch? You know, some of the Oysters, especially the Jubilee bracelets, but even some of the Oyster bracelets, they do start getting stretched. It can get pretty bad over time. Here, let's check out. This is this watch's bracelet, and let's look at that stretch here. You see what I'm saying? It's definitely stretched. I mean, you can get this stretch repaired by Rolex. It's just not going to be cheap. You can also get the bracelet repaired by a third-party company, but can you trust those guys? Are they sitting there looking at your lugs, taking the ones that they think are the nicest or the ones that they feel haven't been polished at all? It's a little tough one if you ask me. It is going to be more expensive to ship it to Rolex and have them fix it, but it might be worth paying that cost so you don't have that worry. I guess it really just depends how much you're worrying, what kind of person are you with the worries. I mean, you can see all the wear I have on this bracelet, and I've never polished it. It's just got a lot of stretch. I mean, this thing's almost 15 years old. It's a little over 14 years old now, officially. Here's the Submariner actually on the bracelet, and it looks fantastic. On the wrist, it looks fantastic. This is an absolute fantastic piece. Now, let's get back to this NATO strap on this Submariner. I mean, just look at that. You know, the NATO, this NATO is actually called the Bond NATO strap from where I got it from, but it's really completely different color than the real Bond NATO. Okay, if you ask me, the real Bond NATO is from the movie Goldfinger. That's the 3rd James Bond, and he rocked a NATO on his Submariner, and just look at this thing. It looks so much different. See, it's more like an olive color with red stripes. It's not just gray. And it didn't fit the watch correctly at all. I mean, at all. I would love to know behind the scenes of exactly where they got that NATO strap, what they were thinking of putting that NATO strap on. Was that something that Sean Connery or one of the directors said, no, 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 James Bond is not wearing a watch with a metal bracelet. He would have to wear something that's, you know, fabric, and that's all they could find? That's got to be, what, 16 millimeter, even 14 millimeter? I mean, it's so funny to me. I mean, just look how off that is. It was so off. I don't think the movie producers really cared on what he was rocking. Maybe it was something like they found the Rolex and it was missing the bracelet, or maybe they thought Bond would never wear a metal bracelet on his watch. I don't know. But either way, it's pretty great. Now, here's a color correct Bond NATO strap on a Submariner just like mine. It looks pretty good. I think I'd keep the gray though. Plus, it's not exactly the same, is it? To be exactly the same, it would have to what, gentlemen? It would have to be 16 millimeter, maybe 14 millimeter. Basically, what I'm saying is it would have to not fit that watch to be the real Bond Submariner. Now, this NATO strap is actually called the Bond because Daniel Craig, when he's rocking expensive watches, he's wearing a NATO strap like this. And you guys know, if you're into the movies and stuff, Daniel Craig's always wearing an Omega. He's not rocking a Rolex, but that doesn't mean that this NATO strap on this Rolex isn't sexy as hell. I mean, just look at this thing. It's beautiful. It is perfect, in my opinion. It really is. And the quality of this NATO is extremely good, but it's not going to be cheap. You've probably seen who has made this by now from just watching this video, but I promise you this is not an advertisement. If you've seen the channel, if you've seen the past videos, I don't really do ads very often. The price is a little high on this though. It's going to cost you over $50 to grab one of these. But if you're wearing a Rolex, I think you can afford the $50. If you guys are really wondering and you can't figure it out by now, Phenomenato is the company who makes this NATO strap, and I do say it is phenomenal. But you know, as long as I've worn this thing, you'd think it would have a little more wear on it, like pieces of the fabric kind of flopping together, pieces of the fabric coming off, little strings flying around, but it just doesn't have that. It did kind of have that here for a second, and I just took a lighter to it and burned them off, and that worked pretty perfectly. But putting it back on the wrist there, and look at that, it's just beautiful on there. It really is. The whole way around. I love this Submariner date on that NATO strap, and I think that's what I'm probably going to be rocking all summer long. And that's just about going to wrap it up for you guys. I know some of you guys are a little worried about my health. You see the shaved head, you know I had my second brain surgery, etc. I am doing pretty well here. I am almost 3 weeks with 0 seizures, so that is getting better. Just got to keep those fingers crossed, thoughts and prayers, all those things for me. Hopefully the doctors beat this thing and I don't have to worry about it anymore. So that wraps it up. I'll see you next time.